Well, everyone, we are up to Perek Daled Mishna Gimel. Mishna Gimel. Hanoitel Zeisim and Amaton. One who takes olives from the vat. Now, olives that were meant to be pressed has to first be softened. So they used to put them into this large vat and let them sit there for several days. And the pressure and heat of the large pile of olives would soften them. So these are olives that are sitting in this vat waiting to be pressed. And what are you doing? You're taking some of them and you want to eat them. And you want to eat them by dipping them in salt. Now, we mentioned before that salting has the ability to be kaveh l'maiser, has the ability to set the produce to the obligation of maiser, trum and maiser, so that you can't snack until you separate them. Here the Mishnah says when you're dipping these olives that you took from the press, and you're dipping them into the salt, you can dip one at a time. Sound familiar? But if what you did was you salted and put in front of you, which means you salted one, put it down, salted another, put it down before you ate, then you're going to be chayiv. Then you're going to have to separate shumas and ma'aser before you can even snack. This is similar to what we said before. One is not a small pile. Two is considered a small pile. And once you have the small pile, plus the fact that you salted, that is going to now set the produce to for the full obligation of shumas and ma'aser. You cannot snack until you actually separate them. Now, there is a question that we really have to ask here, and that is that first of all, is the following. We already had a Mishnah, when the Mishnah previously mentioned salting, that salting is kaveh l'maiser. That was talking about where you're salting it in a way that you're basically, how do they call it? You're treating it with salt. That means you're going to salt it. It's going to sit the salt for a couple of days. You either want to preserve it that way, you want to pickle it that way, but you're treating it in salt. That is when the Mishnah said that it's kaveh, that you can't snack on it. But that same Mishnah said that if you're just dipping it into the salt to flavor it, then you can eat as much as you want. It didn't say there anything about only doing one at a time. So what's the difference? Do we have a contradiction here? And what are the answers that's given, which is the answer brought down here in the notes by the art scroll that we'll work with, is that it depends on how much salt we're talking about. When you're dipping it into a small amount of salt, that's when we say it's not kaveh for ma'aser. Doesn't make a difference how many you salt before you eat. But here in our Mishnah, we're talking about where you're salting it in a large amount of salt that resembles treating it in salt. And therefore, here is where we say, the Chachamim said, well, being that it resembles salting, treating it with salt, which would be kaveh for ma'aser. So here we apply what we said previously by other ways that will set the ma'aser obligation. That if you do one at a time, then you can snack. There's no problem. Once you have two together before you eat, that's a small pile that combined with the other factor, in this case being the salting, that will now set the ma'aser obligation to the point that you cannot snack until you separate the shumas and the ma'aser. So that's the explanation to our Mishnah. Okay, so that's what we have. You're taking these olives. They are clearly on their own in the state that they're in. They are not processed. But now that you're dipping it into the salt, it could become processed if you have two at a time. Now, Rebbe Lezer says, he says we have to look at the following case and consider the following case. Let's say the person I mentioned in the Mishnah, that is, we're talking about a person who is tamei. Person has been contact with a source of tumah, of impurity, he's impure. Okay, so now this is the person who's taking these olives out of the vat. Now, step number one is that we want it to be that as soon as he takes the olives out of the vat, and I really should eat. Rebbe Lezer says, If this vat is full of olives that are pure, that are tahar, then when you take more than one at a time, then chayiv. Then you'll be liable to separate the trimis and the meiser before you snack. Min hatamei potter. But if the vat is full of olives that are already impure, then when you take more than one, you're exempt. I mean, you can snack as much as you want and don't worry about trimis and meisers. Why? Because he returns, in that case, he'll return the extra. Okay, so what's happening is like this. We've got this person who is tamei. We have a vat of olives that are pure. And he wants to take some of those olives. Now, it's important for this case, the fact we're talking about olives that are pure, because that's going to make a very big difference. And therefore, the point is like this. When he takes the olives out, it's talking about he's doing it in a manner where he doesn't make the other olives impure. You know, if he touches the olive, right, just as before he picks it up, he touches it, and he makes it impure, it now touches the other olives and can make them impure. And he doesn't want to do that. They're pure. He wants them to stay pure. So he removes the olives in a way that they don't become impure. The commentary to Tiferes Yisrael says he does it with a wooden utensil that has no receptacle. Something wood that has no receptacle isn't susceptible to tumah. So therefore, if we took, let's say, this flat piece of wood, and he picked up a couple of olives, so the rest of the olives are pure, even the ones on the stick are still pure. But then he's going to take it in his hand because he's going to eat them. Okay, so eventually it's going to come into his hand. He's going to make them impure. So now the question is, well, we just said if you take more than one, then that's a small pile. You're salting it, and you're making a pile. That's the case. You're salting it. You're salting a couple of them before you're eating them. You should have to separate shumas and maisris, as we said before. Rebbe Lezer says, in this case, it's going to be different. It depends on what kind of the vat of olives, what are they? Are they pure or are they impure? If they are pure, the halacha is, then these olives that I salt, if I do more than one, I will have to separate shumas and maisris before I can snack from them. They're already impure. If those olives in the vat are already impure, and I'm impure, so then we say that it doesn't matter now anymore, the fact that you're salting more than one at a time. As the Mishna says, why? Because you will put them back. You'll put the extra back. We had this before in a previous Mishnah, that when you take something, let's say in this case it's olives, and you took those olives, and well, now in the situation, you took those olives, there's more than one, it should become kavur l'maiser. However, in a situation where we say that anything left over, you would put back, then actually we say that all these olives, even the ones that you don't put back, are still considered part of that original amount. My understanding is that every one of them, when you take them, the potential is if it's the one that's going to be left over, it's going to be put back. Because it could be put back, it's still considered part of that pile. And since that pile is not set for the meiser obligation, it's the majority, so to speak, of these olives, then what you took, that minority, follows that majority pile because it's still considered part of it. And therefore, if it's not set for meiser, this is not set for meiser. And even if you took a couple and you salted a couple before you ate them, being that whatever is extra, you would put back. I mean, even though you salted it, you'd put it back. You'd put back the extra. I guess that's what it means, even after you salted it, put it back. Yeah. You would put it back after you salted it, if it's extra, if you don't want to eat anymore. So being that this is the possibility of these olives, therefore, they keep the same status of the original pile. They're still considered part of the original pile, and they follow the status of the original pile. And since that pile that's still in the vat is that those olives gathered in the vat are not kavur l'maiser, neither are these. But that's only going to help you when there's a possibility you're going to put it back. Rebbe Lezer contends like this. If, being your tamei, you're going to handle these olives, when they get out of the vat, they're going to become tamei. So if those olives in the vat are already tamei, then you'll put them back. Because why not? What's the difference? They're tummy anyway. So there is the possibility that you'll put them back. But if they're pure and you made the ones that you took impure, you don't want to put them back because then you're going to make those, that you're going to make them tummy, you make them impure. You don't want to do that. Therefore, says Rebbe Lezer, if, and again, in the case here is that I'm impure, right? I'm impure and I'm going to make whatever I take that was pure impure. So if what is there in the vat is pure, so now the ones that I take out and make impure, eventually by touching them, I dip them in the salt, I make them impure by touching them. Anything extra, am I going to put them back? No, because I don't want to make them impure. They're separate. They're not considered part of the original pile. I look at them alone. If I have more than one, I have a small pile. It's salted. I have to separate shumas and ma'asos even before I snack. But if they the olives in the vat are already impure, so the extra ones that I have that I didn't make them more impure than they were before, I'll put them back. And therefore, being that they would go back, they follow that the original olives that they're still considered part of, and since they are not set for Meiser, the ones in your hand, the one you have by you won't be set for Meiser, even though there's more than one. That is Rebbe Lezer's opinion. That when we're talking about Satanic, now we have to understand the first opinion of the Mishnah made no distinction about this. All that Tana said was the case, the olives in the vat, one at a time. 2, you can't snack until you separate shumas and ma'asos. Rebbe Lezer qualifies that. He said, well, it depends. It depends, number one. It depends if, number one, you're tamei, and if those olives in the vat are pure. If they're pure, then you're right. Since you're not going to put them back, therefore, more than one will be set for the ma'aser obligation. But if what's in there is impure, then it's not so. But the Tanakama didn't agree with that. Tanakama does not agree that there is a difference between the Tanakama didn't make this distinction of Rebbe Lezer to say, well, if they're pure, then they're separate, and then more than one you can't snack from. If they're impure, it doesn't make a difference. He didn't make that distinction. So the Tanakama, the first opinion. So what does he argue about? So he doesn't have to, the part about that says that, well, one second. The part that he argues about, just one second, I'm sorry, I just realized something. He say he would put them back, so they would follow. Just give me 1 second here, I'm sorry. All right. Just realize now how to really understand this Mishnah. According to the Tanakama. The Tanakama, who did not make this distinction, holds the following. If the whole basis of your distinction is that when the olives are pure, you won't put them back. You will put them back. If you make that distinction, so the Tanakama, if that's the basis for your distinction, the Tanakama doesn't agree with that distinction. He doesn't agree with that difference. To say, well, when they are pure, and now the ones that you took, you put impure. So as I say, you won't put them back. So that's where we say that you go one at a time. Tanakama says that's not a good argument, because it's very possible that, or it's possible that even when the olives are pure, that you would put them back. You're going to make them all impure, so you make them impure. And although they were pure, and clearly by keeping them pure, when you put them into that, you originally want them to be pure. But if you make them impure, it's not the end of the world. Number one, you'll take those olives, set them aside, and eat them when you're impure. Okay. Number one, and number two, the commentaries say there seems to be a way, they don't elaborate how you do that, there seems to be a way that even if the actual olives became impure, that the olive you press out of it could be pure. So you're not even necessarily making it more difficult for yourself, but the original goal of pressing them may not even be lost. So the Tanna Kama is saying you can't make this distinction because it doesn't really exist. There's really no difference, at least in the case of the person who's impure. Right. In the case of the person who's impure, to make this distinction, okay, so now, I'm sorry, it's just coming together here. Rebbe Lezer spoke about a very specific case, right? The person is impure, right? The person is impure. No, but okay. Bottom line here is that Tanna Kama disagrees with this distinction. Rebbe Lezer made a distinction between when the person is impure, who's taking these, would he put them back or not? Rebbe Lezer said, if the olives in there are pure, he won't put them back. If they're impure, he will put them back. The Tanna Kama says there's no difference. The first person, even if they were pure, he would put them back. He would put them back. And therefore, why? Because even though he will make those olives that were pure impure, he can save them for when it's time to be impure, right? And just, replace it with other olives. Or it's even possible to press them in a way that the olive that comes out will be pure. So the fact that the Kama didn't make this distinction of Rebbe Lezer shows that he argues with that distinction. Okay. The next positive commandment that potentially a person can disobey and transgress when speaking Lashon Harah is the following. Let's say the person who you spoke Lashon Harah about is a zaken, is an elderly person. In halacha, you become elderly when you hit the age of 70. And when you spoke the Lashon Harah, you said it in front of his face. So you basically put him down. Afilu hu zaken am haaretz. Even if this elderly person is an ignorant person, who's not a Torah scholar, the Torah says that we should honor the face of the elder. And that includes, as we'll see, it includes a Talmud Chacham, a Torah scholar, no matter what age. But it also includes an elderly person, even if they're not a scholar. And what does hidur mean? It says v'hadarta. You shall. Literally, it means beautify. What does that mean? Or hidur who kibud devarim. Hidur means to speak respectfully to them. To speak to the person in a respectful manner. In a place where you put him down, where you disgrace him, you're certainly not. You're not honoring him. So too, let's say he is a Torah scholar. And he's not considered elderly. You also transgress this positive commandment. The zaken dekra haynu chacham, because we know when the Torah talks about zaken, when it says honor the zaken means someone who zeh shekana chachma. It's an acronym. Zeh shekana chachma. It means that it refers to this person who acquired wisdom. So when the pasuk says "Vadar tepnei zaken," it's the wording of the pasuk itself is talking about an elderly person. But we also know that this "vahardarta," which means speak respectfully, refers to an elderly person because the Torah also says "B'pnei seva takum," because of save, which means old age, you should rise. That means someone who is elderly, who's reached the age of 70. That actually halacha says you should rise for that person. V'hadarta, which goes on the zaken, which really means the Talmud Chacham, which means to speak respectfully, the Talmud says also goes back before on the seva, on the elderly person. V'imu zaken v'gam Chacham. Now let's say that this person is an elderly person and also a wise person. Oira mitzvahs v'hadarta b'kiflayim. Then you doubly transgress this mitzvah v'hadarta because you were supposed to. There were two reasons. There were two reasons to go ahead and are this person, which actually was the potential for 2 mitzvahs because they're elderly and they're wise. And if you now disgrace the person, you've transgressed them in both ways, and therefore you've sinned doubly. Have a wonderful Shabbos, a great day.